What's up guys, Phoenix here. This video is going to be another DevPro Duel video in Ranked, and this time just continually exploring competitive options for our current national season. I decided I was going to play with the Burning Abyss Infernoid deck. Now, I personally really like this deck. It's probably my favorite BA variant of the current year. In terms of best BA variant, in terms of which one I like the best, is definitely the YCS Charleston format right after Dark Law had come out. Big BA format where beginning of the end was a card that people were playing because your deck was 3 tour guide and a ton of BA monsters and you played no traps, and this kind of mirrors how that deck sort of played in terms of play style. You have the Burning Abyss monsters, which facilitate an engine and get you moving, and then in the late game you have these very, very big impactful cards in the form of a Nunku, Deviate, a Tondel, and Seismus that you can just fall back on as actual potential threats. Even Leviair and a Decatron is a really, really powerful late to end game presence. It's all just very, very strong and very powerful. The deck very much melds very well upon itself, and it's one of my favorite BA variants, if not my favorite BA variant. Like I said, my favorite BA variant is probably the 2015 YCS Charleston format BA list, because after that, that's the only time that BA was without a doubt the 100% best deck, and it was all BA mirrors, and so your deck was optimized for the BA mirror and stuff like that. And then every other deck like Klee and Satel, it should all you just kind of literally beat out because your deck was better than theirs, stuff like that. But as far as this current year, this deck is arguably the my favorite one, my favorite list from this year, because I don't like the Phantom Knight versions of this deck at all. But anyway, that's enough rambling on. Let's jump into this ranked game, because, yeah, that. Alright, so going into the game, I win rock, paper, scissors, and I choose to blind second. I feel like this deck is better blinding second than it is going first, because you have so many good cards like BAs and Infernoids that in their own right are very good at going into established boards. Being able to fuel your Inferno engine with BA monsters that you can just continually special summon as well is very good, as well as the fact that you have cards like Maxi and Twin Twister maxed out in the deck is also very, very good for you, in the fact that it just allows you to sort of meld your way into plays through boards and stuff like that. So I feel like it's correct to go second with this deck blind. But anyway, so it turns out I'm playing a BA mirror to some degree. He ends up playing the Burning Abyss Phantom Knight deck, and I'm playing BA Infernoid. I feel like I'm playing the superior deck, simply because the deck just has a stronger mid to late game, even though the Phantom Knight engine helps the BA deck just have a stronger early mid game. But anyway, so he starts his turn out with normal summon Graph and reveals Farfa to special summon it, and I chain Maxi. And he decides he's just going to end his turn without making Dante, and I'm completely fine with this. So on my turn, I reveal an Alec, special summon it, and normal summon Graph, make a Dante and mill 3, and I end up milling an Infernoid, Libic, Farfa, and then the Graph that was attached off my Dante. So I construct my chain with all 3 of them. I use Farfa to banish his Graph, Libic special summon Skarm out of my hand, which is very, very good for me because that allows me to get something off of this Graph and make another Dante for free and still get my Skarm Search in the end phase, which was very, very crucial. And I got a Barbar off of the Graph. Arguably debatable. I probably should have just gotten Seer instead, but I don't think it actually would have done anything major towards melding the game state further in my favor, because I didn't get Seer because I knew I was going to be going for starting to do some Infernoid plays, and in your in the mindset of playing this deck, when you are going for game shots with this deck, you usually do it with Dante Deviate, and that's 100 off of 8,000. And so if you put a Barbar under Deviate, or if you just have something big like a Tondel out, that's a couple hundred more off game, but you're able to tribute a Dante that has a Barbar under it, or just tribute a Dante in general and get back a Barbar and discard the Barbar to make a Beatrice on top of a Dante, and then you're able to burn them for that last bit of game. Stuff like that. Little bits like that just make it to where you can do game shots. And so I like to get the Barbar into circulation early, but arguably I probably should have just gotten Seer there, because Seer would have floated Graph back, and which would have floated into Barbar, potentially. But I realized that I just don't have a game shot. If I had a couple more BA names in my hand, I could have definitely done something a bit more in depth with my play string, because I could have made some additional things and had some additional damage output, and I still have to deal with that Farfa that's on his board, which is going to deal with me, game shotting him. So it definitely was not something I wasn't that I was going to be able to do, was game him through that board. But I'm definitely able to set myself up to actually have game on a subsequent turn, because I've got Deviate, which I feel is very powerful. The Dante gets Farfa'd, The one that had the Alec under it gets farfa'd, and it comes back, and so it's just an attack mode at 1000. I've got Barbar under the Dante on the left, and he starts his turn off with tributing my Deviate for a Gamma Seal. So at this point, I haven't seen any Phantom Knight cards, so I'm like, oh, he's just playing the BA Kaiju deck. But then he mills off of a Dante that he makes by revealing another Farfa out of his hand, and the graph that came back off of my Farfa, banishing it, and he makes those into his Dante, detaching graph, milling 3, and he mills a Fog Blade and a Phantom Knight Silent Cloak, and triggers his graph effect. So at this point, I'm like, okay, so he's playing Burning Abyss Phantom Knight with Kaijus, which I don't know how that one works. I feel like you want to just maximize your other cards in the deck. I'm not sure if Kaijus particularly work in that deck. I've seen the BA Kaiju deck, which is literally like 30 BA monsters. It's literally like max of every BA monster in the game, and then you play a ton of Kaijus with Inroad of Kaiju Slumber, and that's a really cool deck. And that's definitely a deck that's had success in the past. I just don't know if there's actually room to warrant playing a sizable Kaiju engine, because if you play Kaijus, I feel like you'd want to maximize on them and play like Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, play like 2 to 3 Gamma Seal, and then play, a couple of the other ones. That's like a 7-8 card engine. So I don't know how well that fits in the Phantom Knight version of this deck, because I personally haven't tested it, and I haven't seen it be anything that's of what you consider the norm. But, so he gets a Scarm out of his deck off of Graph, and then he banishes Fogblade from his grave to bring back the Silent Cloak that was sent to his graveyard off of the Dante with Fogblade, and he normal summons a Ragged Gloves out of his hand, and makes Breaksword. Now Breaksword gets the boost, the mandatory boost from Gloves to 3k, which kind of sucks. If he had another Phantom Knight and then had Ragged Gloves in grave, he could have made a bigger Dark Rebellion, because the Gloves would get its effect onto that instead. But since it's mandatory, it goes on to the Breaksword, even though he's using Breaksword to pop my Dante that had Barbar under it. And so he uses his Breaksword to target his 2 Phantom Knights that were just under that Breaksword to bring him back his level 4s, and my Dante and my Barbar trigger. And so I use Dante to add Graph back to my hand, and then I use Barbar to banish my Scarm, my Libic, and my Alec. I leave the Farfa in the grave that way. So I know I'm going to have to Farfa the Dark Rebellion or the Dante on my next turn. I know it's going to have to be the case. And if I'm able to hit a Scarm off of like another Dante mill, or like just be able, or not Scarm, a Seer, then I'm going to be able to like hit Farfa. Like instead of just having to rely on milling Farfa or getting Farfa out of my deck off Graph, if I mill Seer or Rhino or Farfa, like gives me the most available options to get into my out to his board, because he makes his Dark Rebellion big by sucking up half of Gamma Seal's attack. Then he attacks over my 1000 attack Dante with his 2500 Dante, and then that Dante is able to add back another card. And I'm like, do I add back Barbar or Farfa? If I add back Farfa, I'm going to potentially be stuck having it in my hand and having to special summon it, and that would soak up its effect to banish for the turn, which is something I definitely need. So I decided to add back Barbar, because at the very least it's going to be fodder for me to special summon out of my hand, because I know he's going to be able to search Fiendish Chain off of Ragged Gloves into Silent Boots, and Silent Boots banishing itself for Fogblade, which he does do. And so at this point, I'm thinking my play string is along the lines of Special Graph, Special Barbar, make Grand Pulse, which is the rank 3 MST guy, and then normal summon Tour Guide after I've dealt with the Fogblade. But luckily, I just get really, really rewarded with a top deck of Foolish Burial. So I can use Foolish Burial and just send Calcab and bounces Fogblade. And this was a very it definitely changed how I went about this play string, and if I had not drawn that Foolish Burial, I think I could have come close to having a game shot, but I don't think I could have had a game shot, basically, because like being able to play through that Fogblade would require me to, like I said, Special Barbar, Special Graph, and go straight into Grand Pulse, which is 1, a smaller body, and 2, it doesn't actually fuel my engine any. And so I go Foolish for Calcab on, try to bounce his Fogblade that I know he searched, and he just chains it and puts it on Dark Rebellion, so I can't target Rebellion for attacks now. And so at this point, I have Deviate in grave, and I have the 2 Infernoids in hand. I have no other Infernoids in circulation. So at this point, I'm like, I need to make a Dante, and I need to mill any 1 Infernoid in my deck or the Rhino, and I'll be able to summon Deviate, and Deviate will clear the Fogblade, so that I'll be able to attack over Dark Rebellion. And I make Dante, mill cards, and I mill Twin Twister, Harmadic, and Max C. It's like, alright, that's the 1 Infernoid name I needed. That's it. That's the one. And so I'm very, very happy about that. And so I normal summon the Tour Guide as the last card out of my hand after I summon Deviate and clear the Fogblade. So I just unload my hand of all the Infernoids. Like, took a pretty big minus doing so, but it's fine, because Deviate is going to do exactly what I need it to do in the form of negating the Farfa that's under his Dante. There's a Farfa still under his Dante, which means that he's going to be able to potentially stop me from attacking him for game. He's going to be able to disrupt my board in some form or function. I don't want that. And he's also still got a Fog Blade engraved now because I used Devyade to blow it up. So he has a Phantom Knight engraved in the form of Break Sword and like Silent Cloak. And he's got a Fog Blade loaded, so he can Farfa something away to stop an attack, as well as block an attack with Fog Blade. So I have to play very, very conservatively around this. So I normal summon Tour Guide, and I get Fiendish Rhino Warrior out of my deck, and I overlay both of them into a Leviair the Sea Dragon. And I've already banished a Decatron off of an earlier Infernoid summon. And so I detach Rhino to special summon Decatron. And I use Decatron to send Antra to grave to copy its effect, and I use the Rhino to send Farfa to grave. And I use Farfa to Farfa the Dark Rebellion, and then I use Antra to bounce his Dante. And at this point, his Farfa that was under the Dante falls off and goes to the graveyard, and that triggers. And I use Devyade that's on the board to tribute my Decatron to banish the Farfa and negate its effect. So I already soaked up Antra's ability on the Decatron, and then I just got rid of it because it was not really anything that needed to be used. So because of that Barbar Burn, it put him into game shot range, because at this point any combination of the 3 monsters that are on my side of the field is game, because I attack with the Leviair and that puts him at 24 because he was at 42. And so either Dante hitting him directly or Devyade hitting him directly is just game, because I negated the Farfa. I've gotten rid of his board. I've cleared the 2 threats, the 2 big threats. I've cleared the Dante, cleared the Dark Rebellion, negated the Farfa so that it didn't banish my Devyade, which is what he targeted with it. And that would have definitely, if that had resolved on anything, if I had had a different Infernoid on the board, then that definitely would have just been not game for me. And he would have been able to follow that up with a Tour Guide, plus, Fog Blade that's in his grave, stuff like that, because he wouldn't have had to waste the Fog Blade, stuff like that. But ultimately, just ended up working out in my favor, and like I said, any combination of those 3 monsters was game, because after hitting him with the Leviair, he's at 24. I hit with the Dante, he blocks it with the Fog Blade onto Break Sword, which is going to get banished, so it doesn't trigger in the grave, and so I attack that with Dante again on the replay, and then attack with a Devyade for game. So just very, very simple, very... I don't want to use the term simple, because it's a very complicated string of plays that you actually have to find your way down when you're playing these sorts of decks with the BA decks. It's actually not as clear-cut as people want to make it seem, especially in mirrors. And I classify any deck that uses BA as an engine as a mirror with the Infernoid deck. It's really weird. When you play a BA Infernoid deck, much like when you play BA Monarch, when you're playing against Burning Abyss decks or Monarch decks, those are considered mirrors. And the same thing with the BA Infernoid deck. When you're playing against an Infernoid matchup, or when you're playing against Burning Abyss matchups, those are both considered mirror matches in your mindset. And so you have to play differently. And you actually have to go down this very, very complex string of play that allows you to do things. More so in the BA matchup, because of the fact that Farfa and Graph and Seer and all these floaters do exist. Like you saw, I had to do a very strange sequence of plays to play around Farfa every turn it was on the board and stuff like that. And me using Farfa aggressively against those sorts of boards was very much the actual thing that just defined that game. And that's something that not a lot of people that play the Burning Abyss decks on a more casual level, or aren't super competitive, but they play the deck because they like the archetype, they don't really see that. And I don't see a lot of people play BA mirrors very, very intricately. And that's one of the things that I see a couple of people that I know that just lose BA mirrors consistently, and it's because they don't take the time to change the way they operate their mind in the matchup, because they just aren't familiar with how they need to. Everything that makes their cards amazing is on the other side of the table, and they need to account for that. And I see people that just don't do that. So regardless, that's enough rambling on for the end of this video. I tend to do that at the end of every video, whether or not it's the old way I record or the new way. I just ramble just because I have a lot of things on my mind and things that I want to say. But anyway, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe to all the nonsense you usually do. Links are in the description of my Facebook pages if you want to check those out. Definitely feel free to do so. Other than that, if you want to support me, clicking ads on my videos and disabling ad block when you view my videos is the best way to do so, and it would be greatly appreciated, even if you have an ad block enabled. If you want to really support me and you have an ad block enabled, if I could speak correctly, take a few seconds out of your day, disable the ad block, refresh the video, click an ad or two, and then put the ad block back on when you're done. It takes seconds out of your day, takes no money out of your pocket, and it helps me out a lot more than I can ever express, and you'd have my eternal gratitude. But other than that, that's it for this video, as I've already said, and as always, guys, take care.